Sharing my hobby through videos on YouTube has given me great opportunities. I now do this full-time for a living, made friends, inspired countless people to house animals in naturalistic ways, and much more. However, there is something I've imagined for years that only recently happened when my travels landed me on the other side of the country in Westminster, Colorado. Long before I was ever making YouTube videos, one of the things I always imagined myself doing was making installations at public places for people to enjoy and be inspired by nature. And today I finally get to make that dream happen at Butterfly Pavilion. And I got Sarah here and she's going to tell you a little bit about what they got going on.
So here at Butterfly Pavilion, we are an AZA accredited invertebrate zoo specifically. So we focus on the 97% of animal species that most zoos don't focus their collections on. We have butterflies, we've got beetles, tarantulas, bees, we also have aquatic invertebrates, and really our goal is to educate the public on how incredibly important these animals are, as well as to work on conservation efforts around their care. We do a lot of global research projects working in Mongolia, Sumatra, Tanzania. We also do on-site and within Colorado around conserving native populations of invertebrates as well as breeding programs within the Association of Zoos and Aquariums and supporting active conservation and education through those programs.
That's awesome.
So we're currently in Wings of the Tropics. This is a 7,000 square foot rainforest conservatory where our butterflies are housed, and this is by far our most immersive exhibit. Guests get to walk through a tropical rainforest in Colorado and have experiences with these animals they would never get anywhere else.
Right, and that's why I'm here. I want to take the essence of something natural and immersive like this and bring it down to a smaller scale. As you know, bringing nature down to the small scale is my specialty. Sure, I've made stuff like the micro snail aquarium or the crocs terrariums, but let's be real. Something like Wings of the Tropics makes even the 600-gallon vivarium, the 350-gallon paludarium, or the 165-gallon vivarium I'm about to make look small in comparison. As you'd expect, I wanted to get to work immediately, but I had to meet the animals I was going to work with first. They were housed in a behind-the-scenes room alongside countless other invertebrates, some of which I had the privilege to interact with, including rainbow stag beetles, a massive flower beetle, Goliath beetle larvae, hissing cockroaches, and various stick insects. One drank off of my hand, which was adorable, and another was dancing to mimic leaf movement. I even held a tarantula for the first time ever, which was an amazing experience. Anyway, the animals we came to see were a Peruvian pink-toed tarantula, a burgundy Goliath bird-eater tarantula, and tailless whip scorpions. They all originate from similar environments, so keeping them together makes sense. Well, sort of. They're not being cohabitated, but it will appear that way. Weeks prior to seeing these animals in person, the team at Butterfly Pavilion educated me on how to care for them. I took this information to the drawing board and designed a single enclosure that could house all three species. Essentially, it's a 165-gallon aquarium that's partitioned off into 3 compartments. I sent the design render off to Planet Aquariums, who got to work alongside Sean from Fritz Aquatics to build it. You may remember that he helped set up the saltwater tank last December. Anyway, the process here wasn't much different from what you've seen me do in the animal room. They cleaned and inspected the glass prior to taping it off for consistent beads of silicone. After applying beads in the appropriate areas, the tank was assembled piece by piece, the silicone was smoothed out and allowed to cure. The dividers were installed off camera, and Stuart from Universal Rocks showed up to help Sean add a background. You may remember that I've used their backgrounds before, and the process takes a little bit of time. For this, they simply took measurements, cut the panel down on a table saw, applied silicone on the back, and wedged it in place with cardboards while it cured. From there, the final details were addressed and it was sent to Denver. While the tank was in transit to Butterfly Pavilion, we sorted out the other details, like unboxing materials we sent in the weeks prior. I had a specific vision for this design, which required a large piece of cork bark. Josh's Frogs was kind enough to donate this, along with various types of driftwood and leaf litter, while Kessel provided the lighting, which I'm pulling out of this box. We gathered the remaining materials from local shops, one of which was the Plant Ranch, a trusted source for Butterfly Pavilion. I felt at home in this unassuming plant nursery, where I selected hardy, striking plants ranging in scale, texture, and hue, which should be easily maintained. And I don't know if you can relate, but there's nothing like a good plant haul to bring a smile to your face. Once the tank arrived in Denver, we pulled it off the truck and onto the sidewalk, where we meticulously removed the packaging. This was my first time seeing the tank in person, and I liked what I saw. The background was installed, the partition set, and it was ready for scaping. This giant piece of cork bark allowed me to create a single cohesive scape within the limitations of the partitions. I took measurements, transferred those to the bark, and cut it down accordingly. Taking my time, I did this by hand to ensure the segments were sized properly. Getting them into the tank was a little more challenging though. It was a process of constant adjustments because the link up had to be perfect. And as I got it looking right, I used XPS foam to briefly hold the bark against the background. To ensure nothing gets behind it, I filled the void with expanding foam. I used this to adhere the cork to the background as well. Once the tackiness was gone about 15 minutes later, I pressed down the expanded portions, waited about another hour or so, removed the XPS braces, and continued scaping. I placed several faux rocks in the middle for the tailless whip scorpions, which often live in rock crevices. These came from universal rocks as well. I took manzanita branches and locked them in with aquarium-safe epoxy to create more texture. I wedged sphagnum moss in areas where the foam was still visible as well. Finally, I worked in jungle vines and let it all sit for a few hours. At that point, the facility was closed and we were able to move the tank to its destination. Once in place, I outfitted each tank with bulkheads. Any excess water will simply drain out from these, ensuring the substrate doesn't get soupy. I plugged the holes with coarse filter sponge and filter floss to retain the substrate. The base mix consisted of cocoa fiber, play sand, organic topsoil, and charcoal. That said, I also included excavator clay for the space on the right. This is where the burgundy Goliath bird eater will live. It's a fossorial species, which means it will burrow and live primarily underground. Adding this to the mix will help hold the burrows in the deep layer of substrate I built around the cork bark. I continued at this depth in the next compartment and gradually graded down toward the left. This made room for additional stones to embellish the cave-like appearance on the background, which is where the tailless whip scorpions will reside. Moving to the final space, I continued grading downward to further create the arboreal space for the pink-toe tarantula. On a side note, I didn't add a false bottom to any of these because the drains ensure excess water won't create issues. With substrate in place, I could finally add the plants. The large-leaved plants made it possible to facilitate a canopy and forest floor respectively, while the vining plants in the middle mimicked foliage growing up the side of a rock face. I should also mention that I wrapped off the plant roots in sphagnum moss to retain moisture and create humid pockets throughout. No naturalistic setup is complete without botanicals either. I placed various seed pods, leaf litters, and components from Fritz Nature Box throughout to mimic the look and feel of the forest floor. From there, I continued adding the final details like more branches in the canopy and small-leafed plants, while the Butterfly Pavilion team collected the animals. The pink toe is currently on display, so they moved her to the back room for an easy transfer. Here you can get a proper look at this animal. Isn't it stunning? Next up was the bird eater, which was a bit more challenging. It was in a precarious spot and not quite as placid as the previous tarantula. Finally were the scorpions, which can't really do anything but pinch, so no prep work was required. During that time, I finished things up, sprayed down the plants, and cleaned up the area. That meant the animals were ready for introduction. First up were the tailless whip scorpions. These are unique and wild-looking animals, which makes them perfect for a display. Their spindly arms, erratic movements, and communal behaviors make them a joy to observe. The burgundy Goliath bird eater tarantula was up next and a little more challenging. This impressive spider was shy about entering her new home. As you can see, even though these spiders are large, they are very gentle and deliberate about their actions. Finally was the Peruvian pink-toe tarantula, which was probably the easiest transfer of all, even though she wanted to remain on her driftwood. I don't personally work with these animals and am not privy to their actions, so I was happy to simply document the process and let the experts do their thing. Additionally, we put polycarbonate lids on top to keep the animals in and retain humidity, followed by a canopy. Cross ventilation wasn't an option here, but air movement is essential for success. Instead, each compartment includes adjustable waterproof fans for passive air circulation. This will keep the environment from going stagnant while retaining the proper humidity. Additionally, springtails were added to each setup, but that was done off camera. With the information provided and through research, I recreated habitats that consider the animals' needs while allowing them to feel comfortable even on display. For example, I made a burrow for the bird eater right under the cork bark in the front. Even though it's visible, the foliage and dim light should make it feel at home regardless. That said, it initially decided to go up under a plant. I was told later that day though it moved down to the burrow and has been there since. While the crevices and hiding spots within the background of the middle tank perform a similar function, the scorpions can feel hidden and safe even in plain sight. Again, can we appreciate just how wild these things look? Finally, the branches in the canopy will allow the pink toe to nestle and feel safe high above the forest floor, even in view. I didn't expect just how well it could camouflage against the cork bark. I saw many people look directly at it and not see it. In taking a step back from it all, it was awesome to see the completed piece. Weeks later, I'm told the animals are thriving and that everyone's been enjoying it. I've imagined doing something like this for so long, but it's another story entirely to finally do it. Especially for a place like Butterfly Pavilion, whose mission is to showcase how awesome the invertebrates of the world really are, with a focus on educating about the need to protect and care for threatened habitats globally, while conducting research solutions in invertebrate conservation. I also love how we were able to combine the efforts of Fritz Aquatics, who sponsored my trip to do this and worked on the logistics of making such an endeavor possible, Planet Aquariums, Universal Rocks, Josh's Frogs, Kessel, myself, and of course Butterfly Pavilion for trusting us in their space. Without everyone working together, it would not have been possible to create this awesome display that you can actually see for yourself in person. And as cool as all of that is, this experience not only helped me to fulfill a lifelong dream, but I made a lot of new friends in the process. I also got to give a huge shout out to Jimmy, who films for Fritz now. His help to document this process was invaluable and so much fun. Also, he captured their own rendition of this for the Fritz YouTube channel and is working on content of his own. I'll leave links to all of that in the video description. You know, as we were going through this whole process, Sarah was asking me more about myself and kind of what the mission of SerpaDesign is. As I considered what to say, I asked myself a question: why nature design? I believe that combining the design principles of art with nature creates harmony, visually appealing environments that put the animals first. A design like this allows the inhabitants to feel more secure and thus exhibit a complete range of behaviors even when reviewing them from beyond the glass. That's why I'm dedicated to inspiring the private and public sectors to keep animals in more naturalistic ways. After all, I can't think of a better way to be inspired by nature than to watch it unfold before your eyes.